regarding the descriptions of experiences with these various craft, several of them include biological effects and several do not. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so spheres and orbs, triangular craft, and irregular or organic craft include some descriptions of biological effects, including feelings of unease, electronic device malfunctions, long-term psychological effects such as anxiety or insomnia have been noted, feeling of being watched, a shared awareness with the triangle craft, and under the irregular and organic craft, biological effects include physical sensations of warmth or cold and unexplained smells, psychological distress. So these are very specific descriptions of the reactions of human beings, which allegedly have been noted from a study here, a report. All of those experiences would have been described by the sources that the author used.
I'm not sure I understand.
This is a very broad description of biological effects, and it's striking to me that they are present with relation to some types of craft, but absent in others. This would require a great deal of research and study. Can you explain that?
My understanding is that this is the database is very large. It includes both the images, the videos, the still images, as well as the human intelligence, the reports, the raw data from individuals having these experiences. So in answer to your question, yeah, I mean, I think we're looking at a very large amount of data collected over many decades.
And that data is held by the Department of Defense?
Well, I will say that after I published, I was told that this program, that the USAP was actually managed by the Department of Defense, but held at the White House.
Roger
but
that.
That's a single source, and I don't have multiple sources to verify that.
Thank you, sir. I did my best to trick an answer out of you, but I was partially successful. Madam Chair, I yield.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Frost for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In addition to serving on this committee, the Oversight Committee, I also serve on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, where we often discuss how essential data and evidence are used in science and used at departments such as NASA. During a hearing, NASA Administrator Nelson affirmed the importance of NASA in helping us to understand UAP. Mr. Gold, if the government doesn't have the data it needs on UAP because, say, someone who saw something is concerned about stigma, public backlash, et cetera, or maybe there's just not good systems in place, how are we supposed to ultimately figure out what's going on?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And let me compliment Administrator Nelson that there wouldn't have been a UAP independent study team if it wasn't for his leadership and courage. We're talking about data and where we can get data from. As I described, NASA has whole archives of data, much of which I believe will likely have information that will help inform UAP. We need only look. And again, in an era with AI and ML, we can relatively quickly and easily go through it. So I think it's something that we should encourage NASA to do. However, per Chairman Grothman's comment about UAP focusing on national security sites, I believe there's something, sir, that you may have heard of called sensor bias. That because we've got more cameras, more monitoring of national security, we don't know how extensive UAP activity may be over civilian areas. And this is to the second part of your question where we're not collecting the data. We're not collecting sufficient data from pilots. We're not collecting sufficient data from civilian and commercial activities. And this is, again, where ASRS, I think, could substantially change that, get the data out there, and allow us to do good science.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, on the data, you know, I'm a really big proponent of transparency. But obviously, there's always a little bit of balance that we have to have in government on transparency as well. I mean, last year, NASA appointed a director of UAP research in response to the recommendation by the independent study team. In the final report, there's a quote despite numerous accounts and visuals, the absence of consistent, detailed, and curated observations means we do not presently have the body of data needed to make definite and scientific conclusions about UAP. Can you just talk really quickly about that balance of security and transparency?
So I can say, having served at NASA, it is the most transparent organization I've ever been in. When we would have conversations of executive leadership, things would leak out almost instantly. So I can assure you, intentionally or not, NASA's very transparent. I don't know if many of you have worked with engineers or scientists. They love to talk. So I believe that NASA is a paradigm of transparency, but we must have the ability and the data to be able to be transparent with. And if we're not gathering that, if we're not looking at it, then we can't bring NASA into the game and get to that good science that you need.
You know, it was about a year ago, I was touring a facility with a pretty senior government official. We went by a certain hangar and they said, yeah, that's, you know, a company leases that out. We don't really know what's going on in there. We have no way of knowing what's going on in there. And there was a few of those, in fact, while we were driving around this facility. To what extent do you think that some of the UAP out there comes from off the books or unauthorized experimental aircraft?
I mean, I think probably the vast majority of UAP are drones, experimental aircraft, weather conditions, which is, again, why I say if we review the data, I think we're going to discover a lot about things we weren't even thinking about. But there is a percentage that isn't. And looking into those anomalies is how discoveries will be made. And relative to science, Congressman, if I can say, when NASA studies black holes, when NASA studies galaxies, we have instruments that are tailored to do so. With UAP, we're using cockpit gun cameras or cell phones. We could never do good science with that. And let me tell you, the NASA budget is under pressure. We need to make sure that the Artemis program is funded fully. We need to beat China to the moon and maintain our presence in low Earth orbit. So NASA would need more money to do this, but I think tailored instruments that would look at UAP in the same way that we have tailored instruments to look at astronomical data is important to gathering valuable and uniform information. If we were studying black holes by using fighter cockpit cameras, we probably wouldn't know that much about black holes.
100%. Well, I think it's important that federal leaders take the necessary steps to ensure that UAP does not pose threats to the American public as well, and that we have the necessary budgets to collect this data so we can actually see what's going on. And I'm fully supportive of funding the Artemis mission. I think it's very important. Also, a personal note, the pilot is a frat brother of mine. He is a member of the Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, and so I would love to see my fraternity make it to the moon.
But Redwire is building the cameras for Artemis, so we will take some pictures of your frat brother and get them.
There we go. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you. I will now recognize Ms. Luna for 5 minutes of questioning.
Mr. Elizondo, to your knowledge, can you name the country and around time frame that the first back-engineered UAP program started?
Ma'am, unfortunately, I would not be able to have that conversation in public.
Can anyone on the panel name that? None of you? Okay. This next question is for Mr. Gallaudet. To your knowledge, have any USOs ever outpaced our submarines?
Yes, ma'am.
At what magnitude?
I don't have the exact speed, but again, a witness came to me, a credible former submarine officer who observed it on sonar data. And this was in the 80s in the North Atlantic during a storm, and it outpaced his submarine by orders of magnitude.
Are you aware of any hotspots that currently exist off our shores in North America?
Not with sufficiently credible data, ma'am.
Okay, we've heard reports of there potentially being hotspots, maybe entry and exit points. Have you heard of any of that?
I have not, ma'am, but my colleague here, Mr. Elizondo, does discuss some USO activity that he's observed in certain DoD databases.
Mr. Elizondo, in regards to these aircraft being piloted by whatever they might be, non-human biologics, would you agree that it's likely that they are being piloted? Have you heard of by some mind-body connection?
Ma'am, I think it is safe to presume here that they are being intelligently controlled because some cases seem to anticipate our maneuvers And in other cases, they seem to, I came across an email where the word stalked was used in a very secure email between Navy officers discussing their ships being pursued by a UAP.
In our previous panel, we had Grush, and he had testified to say that some of these were interdimensional beings. Can you speak on that at all?
Ma'am, I'm not qualified, certainly as a scientist or otherwise, to speculate points of origin.
Oh, they're
I look
down.
at
They
everything
love
from a scientific
dancing around these
perspective.
fucking
So if
questions,
you look
bro.
at,
They
for
love
example,
it.
instantaneous acceleration,
You
which
never
is
get
one
a
of the
direct
observables
answer from these
of the
people
program
because
that
they
I
know
belong
exactly
to,
what the
ATIP,
fuck they're talking
the
about.
human body can withstand about 9 G-forces for a short period of time before you suffer negative biological consequences, blackouts and ultimately redouts and even death. Comparison, our best technology, the F-16, which is this older platform, but one of our most highly maneuverable aircraft, manned aircraft, made by General Dynamics, can perform about 17 or 18 G-forces before you start having structural failure, meaning that the airframe begins to disintegrate while you're flying. The vehicles we're talking about are performing in excess of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 Gs.
Jesus.
So are you, I guess, would it be safe to infer that they're living craft?
I'm not prepared at this point to state for the record is something alive or not, because even that definition is hard. There was a time in science we thought that life required oxygen, and we now know that's not true. There are anaerobic bacteria that thrive in oxygen environments that lack oxygen. And so also same with photosynthesis. When I was in college, I was told everything is derived from photosynthesis as a form of energy. In reality, that's not true. There are things that live off of chemosynthesis. So we're constantly having to reevaluate our understanding of what the definition of life is.
Do any of you ever come across reports from people that claim to have firsthand experiences with these entities, whatever they might be, or these aircraft, and then as a result, whether or not they're religious, find that these things will automatically disappear? Anyone, and this is open to any of you on the panel. So just real quick, because I'm running out of time. Lou?
Ma'am, I've always been a nuts and bolts kind of guy. When I was at ATIP, I was focusing more on the performance characteristics and less on the potential occupants.
Okay, the reason I ask is because it seems like, just based on our conversations, that we've had people that say that there are good and bad of whatever these things are. And so my concern from a national security perspective is A, that true? B, are you guys hearing the reports of that? And C, I think moving forward in regards to technology, Mr. Gold, if you can answer this real quickly, some of these aircraft, it seems that they are operating off of energy that we don't currently have. But just yes or no, in your opinion, if we were able to obtain that, would that impact humanity for the better or negative?
Would certainly save us some money on funding on Artemis.
Definitely.
And this is a national security issue, that if there is such technology out there, we're not the only country that might have access to it. We don't want to be on the wrong end of technological surprise.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you guys for your time.
All right,
That's
thank
it?
you. I will now recognize Mr. Garcia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I apologize for stepping out. My governor is here upstairs, so I'm trying to get in between meetings, so apologize for that. I want to just start by just asking everyone on the panel or witnesses, and I had a chance to read all the testimony before, but just to set the agenda, just if we can go down real briefly, do you believe, just for the record, that the federal government, any part of the federal government, is knowingly concealing evidence about UAPs from the public?
Yes, sir.
100%.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I also want to just go down the line. I know many of you have already said this, but I just for the record again, just briefly, what do you believe UAPs could be or are?
Strong evidence that they are non-human, higher intelligence.
I echo my colleague's comment, sir.
Genuinely do not know.
Don't know, but we must find out.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate those answers, gentlemen. I think this is obviously another remarkable hearing with just really important information, so I thank all of you for answering the questions. Admiral, I just want to go back to one thing. Now, last year, our subcommittee heard from 2 retired Navy pilots, Lieutenant Ryan Graves and Commander David Fravor, regarding UAPs. Actually, I think Ryan is here in the audience and been a great person to get to know and to have conversations with. He, of course, has been involved in the Safe Airspace for Americans Act with Chairman Graves, with Chairwoman Mace for UAP reporting by civilian aviation personnel. Can you discuss briefly why it's important for civilian pilots to be able to report UAPs and why these legal protections are critical for our national security.
Yes, Congressman, thank you. And I did invite Ryan Graves as my guest, as I'm on his advisory board for the Americans for Safe Aerospace, and legislation that you supported and introduced, I fully support as well. And I think it's important that more civilian pilots, commercial pilots, report so we can better understand and learn and do research on UAP, as well as remove the stigma so more citizens report on what they observe. And also, it'll only contribute to aviation safety when we have a better understanding of where these UAP are, how they operate, and at what frequency and what capability level. So it's important for aviation safety, and it'll be important for moving science and research forward.
Thank you, sir. And I just want to reiterate to my colleagues, I mean, this is a very bipartisan piece of legislation, and we just got to continue to get this through the Congress, and it's incredibly important that civilian pilots have the opportunity to safely report the UAPs that they are seeing or encountering in the air. And I can't express how critical this piece of what I believe is a larger collection of evidence and facts actually happen. We've been approached by pilots. I've talked to folks that have been engaged with our office and others, and there is still enormous stigma. And essentially, we don't have a system where folks are feeling free to be able to report what they're seeing. And so I just want to reiterate that advocacy. Mr. Gold, in your testimony, you discussed NASA's aviation safety reporting system, a confidential, non-punitive reporting mechanism. In the Safe Airspace for Americans Act, we explicitly allow for civilian reporting, of course, of UAPs. Can you explain why the NASA task force recommended the use of the aviation safety reporting system?
The aviation safety reporting system is an existing system that is trusted, that has taken hundreds of thousands, now millions of cases. And again, recognizing budgetary constraints, this seemed like the perfect way to be able to gain more data. And when it comes to the stigma, sir, it's something that pilots are used to reporting on, that crew is used to reporting on. So it's a great way to get data, to overcome the stigma without spending really that much more additional money since the system exists. Thank you so much for your support of that. Thank you for what Ryan Graves does. This is a common sense means to expose the truth of UAP for the purpose of this hearing.
Thank you. And I just want to also add, now earlier this year, as part of the House Defense Authorization Bill, the NDAA, I had filed an amendment to include the UAP Disclosure Act, which would create a UAP Records Review Board and exercise of eminent domain over UAP-related material, modeled actually on the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act, which is widely known. Now, the amendment was blocked, but thankfully the Senate included the amendment by Senator Rounds and Schumer for the UAP Disclosure Act. So I just again want to say that we should be pushing and ensuring the UAP Disclosure Act, which is bipartisan in its support, should move forward. And if I can just briefly, particularly Admiral, can you just briefly, as I close my time, explain why the UAP Disclosure Act would be critical for us and our national security?
Thank you, Congressman. Yes, I believe the UAP Disclosure Act is important for national security, as well as advancing potential socioeconomic benefits resulting from UAP research, as well as public safety, as we referred to previously regarding aviation. And this act will allow for greater transparency and open research, and that's why I'm also a member of the UAP Disclosure Fund as an advisor, as in the Sol Foundation, as an advisor, senior strategic advisor, which is advocating for the same.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
All right, thank you. I'd like to recognize Mr. Biggs for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for holding this committee. Thank you to the witnesses. Admiral, the video that is called the Go Fast video, the email that you've talked about being deleted, I just want to briefly cover this. You said that the email, the author was asking whether any of the recipients were aware of the classified technology demonstrations that it could explain the objects that were observed. And then you said the email disappears. Then you guys have a series of meetings. The commander of fleet forces and his operations officer never discussed the incident again. Is that right? Is that accurate?
That's accurate, sir.
And even during weekly meetings, it was never discussed again. My question for you is, you were in those meetings. Did you personally hear that nothing was going on about that?
Yes, sir. I was in those meetings, and
did you make inquiries about that?
No, I did not, sir, because I inferred, since I had been read into other special access programs, that this UAP video was part of one that I was not read into, or any of the recipients, or the author of the email, and that an intelligence agency basically pulled it back and instructed the author of the email, hey, this is, you just conducted what they call spillage into a lower classification level, and when that's done, the procedures are basically to remove any of the communication.
You're going to silo it. So, and you, Mr. Elizondo, you said in your report and your testimony today, a government work on the UAP subject still remains classified. Excessive secrecies led to grave misdeeds against loyal civil servants, military personnel, and the public, all to hide the fact that we are not alone in the cosmos. Fair?
Yes, sir.
All right, and all of you, and Mr. Schellenberger, by the way, I've read several of your books, Mr. Schellenberger, excellent stuff. Thank you. What I would say, too, is you were asked about the veracity of the author of this report. You comfortable with the veracity?
Yes.
Okay. And then, and I'll get to you in a second, Mr. Gold. We'll talk about Kuhnian and Lakatoshian scientific advancement and how we're obviating that through these processes. But we'll get to that in a sec. Because what I want to really get to is the ultimate question really becomes this. For what purpose is the federal government overclassifying, because that's what they're doing, they're overclassifying, and forbidding the public for getting access to this? And if you know, if you have an explanation, I'm curious because I know what I've been told. I just want to know from your perspective, why do they overclassify? Mr. Elizondo, you look like you're finger on the button, ready to go.
Yes, sir. Forgive me. I think there's several reasons. I think at the time when this reality became evident to the U.S. government, we were in the middle of the Cold War with then Soviet Union, and we did not want to tip our hands to what our knowledge base was on this topic. We did not want to broadcast that to
the Cold War's long over.
It is, sir. It is, sir. There's also then the philosophical argument that the Department of Defense and the intelligence community is solution-oriented. And when you don't have answers, it's a really tough spot to be in.
It's easier to be quiet and suppressed than if you don't have the answer.
Indeed, sir. In fact, there's a very real example when we built the U-2 spy plane and flew it over then Russia, and we're taking reconnaissance. And when we first started flying the aircraft, it flew so high and so fast we thought they weren't tracking us. In reality, they were tracking every flight. It wasn't until the Russians could develop the SA-2 surface-to-air missile and successfully shoot them down.
I would suggest to you also, along with Lakatos and Kuhn, you also have a problem with Kenneth Arrow's path dependence or increasing returns. That's one reason why they won't disclose it. It's too painful to admit. But I just want to read a couple things from Mr. Schellenberger's what he gave to us today, because I think this is interesting stuff, and I just want to convey this to you. On USG networks, there exists infrared footage of and imagery of a grouping of vessels engaged in SIGINT and mass collection at night in a specific area of the Pacific Ocean. This footage, which was in close proximity to the vessels, a large equilateral triangle UAP suddenly appears directly over the ships. These three bright points are seen at each bottom corner of the UAP, which is observed to slowly rotate on its horizontal axis. And he goes on to describe that. And I just want to read one more, and I'm doing this because I think it's interesting. This stuff is interesting as anything. So let's get this one here, right here. While performing a routine airspace surveillance and control mission in the Eastern Air Defense Sector, an F-22 fighter observed multiple UAP contacts at mission altitude. Moving to intercept, the F-22 pilot noted multiple metallic orbs slightly smaller than a sedan hovering in place. Upon vectoring towards the UAPs, a smaller formation of the metallic orbs accelerated at rapid speed towards the F-22, which was unable to establish radar locks on the presumed hostile UAPs. The F-22 broke trajectory and attempted to evade, but was intercepted and boxed in by approximately 3 to 6 UAPs. And then I'll leave that there, but because I just have no more time left. Well, she's not looking. So let's just get into, let's get into part of this.
I thought I would be saved by the bell.
No. Let's talk about Kuhnian, Lakatoshian type of scientific development. And the problem that we have here is you have institutional blockage of what would be normal development of scientific ideas. And if you want to expand that, Mr. Gold.
We're over time, so be very fast, please.
I'll just say I'm a recovering attorney, so please take it easy on the science. But all breakthroughs have been heretical at first, and that's the challenge that we face, particularly with something as extraordinary as this, which is why gathering the data is so important. And I'll just end by saying, by the way, the overclassification of material is in no way limited to UAP. That is occurring throughout the government, as well as the inability to get people classifications in a timely and efficient manner, and then to have those classifications be broad enough to be useful. So this is a larger issue that I hope that Congress will look at.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Biggs. I've been generous. All right, Mr. Burleson, I'll recognize you for 5 minutes of questions, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Elizondo, does any branch of the United States government or defense contractors possess technology?
Sir, there's documentation that I believe was submitted for the record that was approved for release by the U.S. Pentagon, by the Department of Defense Office of Pre-Publication Security Review, and it states one of the reasons why my predecessor program, OSAP, was trying to collect material of unknown origin.
Was it successfully collected?
It was not. What happened is that there was an aerospace contract company that requested to divest itself of the material that was collected in the 1950s. Unfortunately, that didn't actually occur.
So let's dive into that. That's the Bigelow Aerospace, correct? So
yes, sir.
There was a journalist, Christopher Sharp, who said that there was a transfer between Lockheed Martin, Bigelow Aerospace, and the CIA allegedly blocked this. Can you describe that?
What I can say is that it was blocked. Why it was blocked, I can only surmise. I was part of some conversations later on with some of those contract personnel where they had told all of us that is accurate. What we required was a memo from the Secretary of the Air Force in order to make that complete, and that never occurred. And so when Secretary Mattis became Secretary of Defense, I decided it would be appropriate for me to try to receive a memo from him as SecDef, as Secretary of Defense, if we could not get a memo from the Secretary of the Air Force to transfer that material.
So if that material exists today, who's in possession?
Sir, I wouldn't be able to have that conversation in an open hearing. We'd probably have to have that.
Okay, my question to you then is, if we were in a secure setting, if we were in a SCIF, would you be able to provide or get access to something, whether it's visuals or material that we could put our hands on, or biologics, that would convince me, that would show me that we have non-human origins?
Sir, that decision would not be mine. That would be to the gatekeeper still in the U.S. government.
And who would we, so if you were in our shoes, where would you go from here? How would you get that information?
I can't give you that information.
You know, a lot of times we just don't know who to ask because we don't know where to go next. So if you were in our shoes, where would you go?
Well, I prefer to answer that question in a closed session. However, we established AARO for that very purpose, and unfortunately, under its previous leadership, it failed. So one would hope that they would have the authorities necessary to do that. Let's hope that this new iteration of leadership will be successful.
In the discussions, it's simply about material, or is there discussion about it was previously testified that there was biologics that were collected. Are you aware of any of that?
I am, sir, aware of the reporting that biologics have been recovered. Again, my focus was more nuts and bolts, looking at the physical aspects of these phenomena, how they interacted around military equities and nuclear equities. So I'm certainly not a medical expert. I would not be able to probably provide you a whole lot of value in that simply because I don't have the expertise.
But was anything described as that we have possession of bodies?
Yes, yes.
We have is it multiple types of creatures, or?
Sir, I couldn't answer that. I can tell you anecdotally that it was discussed quite a bit when I was at the Pentagon. The problem is the supposed collection of these biological samples occurred before my time, in fact, before I was even born.
And was this part of the Lockheed Martin discussion, or was this the biologics is a completely separate?
Separate yet related.
Okay. Has anyone made contact?
Sir, I'm sorry, could you specify?
Has there been any, to your knowledge, any communication with a non-human life form?
So the term communication is a bit of a trick word because there's verbal communication like we're having now. The problem is you also have nonverbal communication. And so I would say definitively yes, but from a nonverbal meaning, when a Russian reconnaissance aircraft comes into U.S. airspace, we scramble 2 F-22s, and we are certainly communicating intent and capability. I think the same goes with this. We have these things that are being observed over controlled U.S. airspace, and they're not really doing a good job hiding themselves. They're making it pretty obvious they have the ability to even interfere with our nuclear equities and our nuclear readiness.
Is the United States government or in our contractors, are they pulling technology from this? Are they're reverse engineering this?
Sir, as I previously stated, and please forgive me, I am not authorized to discuss specifics about crash retrievals. I signed documentation with the U.S. government. What I can say was, after a very thorough review process by the Pentagon, what I wrote about, and that was my limit, unfortunately, that I was given.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I would like to recognize Mr. Timmons for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Elizondo, you just said something interesting. You said they don't seem to be hiding. They don't seem to be hiding. The UAP sightings are becoming increasingly brash, if you will. And, we've been hearing about these for years, but they've generally been isolated and not as consistent and over critical military installations. Would you say that's fair? Is this becoming increasingly often? Is it happening more and more?
Great question, sir. Let me see if I can answer this for you. Certainly, there seems to be some indication that they're being provocative, meaning that they're, in some cases, literally splitting aircraft formations right down the middle. So that's an air safety issue. The question is it the frequency increasing? And really the response is it depends. Yes, it's possible that there is an increase in frequency, but it's also possible that there's heightened awareness now, and there's also more pervasiveness of technology out there that's collecting this information and that can record this information. So we're not quite sure yet if it's actually an increase in numbers of these events, or is it that we have better equipment now that to record these things, and we have a better ability, if you will, to analyze these things.
And that's my next question. It seems that a lot of these sightings occur near military installations. Do you think that these UAPs are intentionally targeting military installations, or do you think that we have increased abilities to monitor surrounding the military installations?
Sir, maybe both. Part of my concern is we have something in the Department of Defense and the intelligence community called IPB, Initial Preparations of the Battle Space. And we use equities like ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or other type of equities and technologies to prep the battle space. And certainly, if I was wearing my national security hat, even if there was a 2% chance that there was some sort of hostile intent here, that's 2% higher than we really can accept. And so we must figure out, there's a calculus, capabilities versus intent, in order to identify if something is a national security threat. We've seen some of the capabilities, yet we have no idea in the intent. And so this is why this discussion is somewhat, I think, problematic from a governmental perspective, because we have no idea.
Yeah, sure, thank you. Mr. Schellenberger, you're particularly familiar with the Langley Air Force Base incident a year ago? Are you familiar?
Just from what I read in the
Just
news.
from what you've read?
Yeah.
I would imagine a large percentage of the American population became aware of that with the Wall Street Journal article. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And were you aware of that incident prior to the Wall Street Journal article?
No.
To the rest of the panel, was the Wall Street Journal article the first time that y'all were made aware of what was essentially an over 2-week UAP frenzy over Langley Air Force Base? Were y'all aware of this prior to the Wall Street Journal article? Anybody? Show of hands. Yes,
sir.
Dr. Guyette, could you give me how did you become aware of it?
A colleague of mine who I referenced previously, Chris Mellon, he wrote an extensive article about this, that there were other incursions of drones over Langley before this, as well as many, many military installations over the last 5 decades.
And it's my understanding that there's been an ever increasing in number, and I'm trying to think how to say this because I wear 2 different hats. I'm still in the Air Force. So, I mean, it seems that they're becoming increasingly brash, and the question that we really have to figure out is it China or is it non-human? And I think that's the biggest question the American people want to know. If it's China, it's scary because they have a lot of technology that we cannot explain. And if it's non-human, that's scary because we don't know the intent. Would you say that's fair?
Yes, Congressman. And in fact, I really believe that we should use this hearing as a catalyst to improve and bolster our air defense capabilities and our maritime domain awareness capabilities, because obviously there are holes in it, whether it be UAP of non-HI direction or NHI direction, or, as you say, sir, China or any other adversary.
Are you all aware of any task force at the Pentagon or in the national security apparatus that's trying to assess the answer to that question?
At the current moment, sir, no, but this is a great point. From 2020 to 2022, there was a UAP task force in the DoD succeeding where Mr. Elizondo worked, led by Jay Stratton, who had the first comprehensive whole-of-government approach to UAP, which involved pathways to declassification and to increase transparency, as well as assessing the national security risks of UAP. This was a really well-established approach, and we have all advocated that something like it return.
I'm running out of time. The last thing is that we need authorities. The law enforcement, military do not have authorities to actually engage, and Congress needs to act to give those authorities to local law enforcement and the military so they have clear guidelines on how to assess these issues going forward. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Ms. Boebert for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now that we have all been cautioned in this committee hearing that the mention of Pentagon's Immaculate Constellation program could put us on a list, well, I already find myself on many lists, I'm sure. So I speak my mind often, so why not just keep going with it? May as well just go all out and say it. The earth is flat, birds are government drones, and we've never set foot on the moon, and Joe Biden received 81 million votes in the 2020 election. So let's just see how many lists we could get on here today. But Mr. Schellenberger, I wanted to ask you, I think I understand from this hearing that you would agree that classifying information like this is not in the best interest of the people. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, with the caveat that, of course, I would support classification necessary to protect secrets essential to national security, but I think it's pretty obvious that there's overclassification.
Overclassification, yes. And so in most instances, if they can't tell us what, do you think at some point they'll at least tell us why?
President-elect Trump has repeatedly committed to greater transparency, both on the UAP issue, on JFK files, on COVID origins, and many other things. So I think that we need to make sure that the next administration is held accountable for that.
Agreed. And this is for all four of you. Yes or no, please. I have many questions I want to get to. Are there any known instances of recovered materials or technologies that are not of human origin and maybe connected to any advanced bioscience defense programs within the USG?
I don't know.
I wouldn't be able to answer that, ma'am.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay, so there are rumors that have come up to the Hill of a secretive project within the Department of Defense involving the manipulation of human genetics with what is described as non-human genetic material, potentially for the enhancement of human capabilities, hybrids. Are any of you familiar with that, yes or no?
No, ma'am.
I am not, ma'am.
Right? Always with the I don't know. But
okay, I would like to know, with Immaculate Constellation, how does this relate to UAP activities, Mr. Schellenberg, in oceanic environments? Are there any instances where the Navy or other maritime forces have encountered UAPs that could not be explained by known technology or natural phenomena?
Yeah, the Immaculate Constellation
I don't know if you just jumped in, but
covers
you missed a
both
whole bunch of
terrestrial and
shit.
oceanic, and there's actually a number of cases described in the report that occur in the ocean.
And do you believe that there is a concerted effort by the Pentagon to keep Congress out of the loop regarding these UAP activities, specifically in our waters?
Yes.
I think it's about 5% of our ocean that's actually been studied in detail by man, and we've studied more of space than we had of our own oceans. And so are there any accounts of UAPs emerging from or submerging into our water, which could indicate a base or presence beneath the ocean's surface?
I don't know about a base, but, you know, as I mentioned, I had a different source entirely
Exactly.
describe this pretty extraordinary footage that exists of orbs, of an orb coming out of the ocean and being met by another orb.
Some would say that there's multiple
They
hotspots
basically
where we
just
see frequent
admitted to a bunch
activity.
of
So
old
in your
projects.
investigations, have you come across any data or visual evidence like sonar readings or underwater footage of these UAPs?
I have not beyond what's in the report.
You've written about UAPs not only in the air but in underwater. Are there any specifics on what you've learned about the UAP activity in our oceans? Particularly, have you spoken with sources who have provided any evidence or eyewitness accounts of these UAPs interacting with our naval forces or being detected by our underwater surveillance systems?
Nothing beyond what's in the report and then the specific case that I mentioned with the orbs.
So this report says it all. There's no other information that we are aware of regarding the activity within our waters.
I have other sources that have told me that have shared a significant amount of information, but they're not comfortable with me sharing it at this point.
Okay. Are there any technological capabilities observed in these oceanic UAPs that seem to defy our current understanding of physics
We're not in
or
your video
our
though. This nigga would have to
engineering
fight too hard to get
capabilities?
those
It
videos.
seems like they all do.
Yes, I would agree with that.
They'll comply
My
with the
time is up, but I do
transparency and give us
appreciate
little
your bravery,
chips
your
here and
courage for
there.
coming here and
Yeah, that
speaking
story
today.
was true. Yeah,
And
this
seems
story
like
was
there's
true.
still some questions
Oh, but I
that we
can't
need
tell you what
answers
actually
to, and
happened.
we will not relent until we get those to the American
It's
people.
like,
Thank you all.
motherfucker, you
Thank you.
give
I
me
move to allow
half truths.
myself and
Tell
the
me the
ranking
whole
member 5
shit. If you're
additional
gonna admit
minutes
to
for
it, just tell me
questions
what
without
the fuck
objection,
happened.
so ordered.
It just admitted to a bunch of
Mr.
shit.
Elizondo, were you
There's
read
different
into
life
the Immaculate
forms.
Constellation?
Not all life
Ma'am, I
form
would not be authorized to
exists the way
confirm
we
nor
exist
deny the
and
existence of
function the
any
way we function.
ongoing
Some
or
don't breathe.
past
Some
program,
don't live off of
especially as
oxygen.
it
Some
relates
don't live
to a
off
special
of
access program, either
energy
by
at all.
name or trigraph.
Okay, and then
And a lot of flying
does the
shit,
U.S.
some
government
of
or
it's
private
alive,
contractors, do
some
they
of it
work with
isn't,
other foreign
some of it's
countries, China, for
drone-like.
example, to exchange
Fucking
data,
crazy,
quote, from
bro.
a source, that intelligence data about UAP?
Let me, if I can answer that a little bit more generally, ma'am, if I may. We do have foreign
Yeah.
material exploitation programs.
Some of us can't, though.
That is something that is
And that's
widely
the
known,
problem. There's
and
too
that
many
term
stupid
itself is
people, and
unclassified.
there are
How
more
exactly that
stupid
works
people
becomes
than
a bit
people like
sensitive.
us who can
That's
rationalize
a
and be like,
discussion
oh,
we can certainly
okay,
have
aliens
in
exist,
a
fine,
closed session
whatever.
if you like. We do
A
work
lot
with
of people
international
fucking
partners and
panic and
allies
be out here
quite often,
fucking
not just
running
in
in
military
the
exercises
streets
and
and
workups,
causing a
but in
ruckus and
other
shit,
intelligence
screaming in the middle of the street,
efforts as
running
well.
into
In
cars and
terms of
shit,
material that's given to private contractors,
jumping
is
out of
certain material given to
buildings.
certain contractors because of their experience? So, for example, if it's related to submerged and undersea propulsion, would it go to a general contractor like General Dynamics?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely correct. Different contractors have different levels of expertise.
What's Lockheed's expertise
Aerospace, ma'am.
in the UAP space? That's all that they would do submerged.
No, I didn't say that, ma'am.
Okay.
Lockheed Martin and others do quite a bit of work both
Yeah, I know.
in our
That's too much
atmosphere, in
to pick
space,
up.
and even underwater. There are
Like,
certain
we're all gonna pay for that
efforts
shit.
to.
People who don't partake in it are
It's a
gonna
tough
be
question. You
mentally
guys
fucked
put me
up.
on the spot here.
I'm asking.
And there's gonna be a lot of
Yes,
those.
ma'am. No, they are involved in
Can't
a
deal
lot.
with that.
I would rather let Lockheed
It's the
Martin explain
aftermath we
the
can't really
different
deal with. Too
domains
many
that they are involved with.
casualties.
Probably am not authorized
That's
to
what
discuss
sucks
that, but they
about
are involved in a
stupid people.
lot of different areas and
They
domains.
just
Admiral,
can't
flight safety risks for our pilots, based on what
think.
you've experienced and seen in your career.
Just think about it,
They're
bro.
extensive, and the one
Not that
exercise I
serious.
referred to where I received the
Yes,
email
you've
that
been
was
lied
then
to
deleted was
your entire
the
life.
pilots, and
But,
this
you
is
know,
worth bringing out.
yeah.
There are debunkers out there who have said the Go Fast video
At
was
least you're
just
not
a balloon.
enslaved
That
or
was only
anything,
one
you
video
know?
that
You
was
just got
released.
lied to.
There were
It's a
dozens
good
of these
trade-off.
encounters that pilots, friends of Ryan Graves, who's in this room right here, witnessed and caused significant safety concerns. And to almost call out and exercise it and shut it
Man,
down,
Aquaman as well.
which is
Flood
very
or shit,
compressed,
man.
and the carrier's getting ready for
I can't
deployment, and the
swim,
pilots
bitch.
have to get certified to land on the carrier. It's extreme, to
Nigga
say the
can't
least.
swim.
All right, I have two last
Or be
questions.
stuck.
Real quickly, Mr. Schellenberger, how do we get more whistleblowers to come forward?
Well, this hearing does, is very important, and obviously, I
do want, like,
can't encourage
us to just
whistleblowers to obtain
faster
information, but I
shit, just
can
make big
guarantee
spaceships
that
that
I
are
will
like as
protect them and
big
go
as
to
a
prison to
planet,
protect their
so we can
identities
bounce.
that come to me.
Yes, sir. Okay, my last
Leadership behind
question,
it.
the
It needs to
first
be
hearing we
tied
had on
to
this,
this. This is just
I never been
piece
briefed
of
on
rock. Let's
UAPs or what they
bounce.
were,
Fuck
biologics,
out here.
non-human, et cetera. Find non-human biologics, non-human intelligence. What are we
There
actually
we go.
talking about?
Yeah.
Admiral, and we'll go
That's
down
the
the line.
real question, bitch.
I don't think it's a stretch when you look at the diversity of life on this planet and the size of this universe to think that there would be more diverse, higher
Yeah, that
order,
makes sense.
non-human intelligences throughout the universe. And that's probably what's visiting us.
I would take the scientific approach. The
I
definition
guess
would
you
be
can
the
see it
ability
as that
to
way, or
react
you
to a
can just
stimulus
see it as a shit spinning
in a manner
an orbit,
that requires
and
an
we're just
intellectual
far
thought
away
process.
from a right distance from the Earth
just
to
don't
be
know.
able to sustain life.
I think we must be modest in our
This
assumptions
one
that
got
we're looking for
lucky out of all
intelligence
the
that could
ones
be
that are
biological.
spinning
It might not.
just because of science and distance and space.
Non-biological, but what non-biological intelligence, what does that mean, though?
Artificial
And if
intelligence,
not
ML, machines.
by
We
accident, then
assume
by
that all
God's will,
intelligence
but
would be
that's
like us. And every time we look
science
out
is
in the
still real,
universe,
even if
we are
like you believe
humbled
in
relative
it,
to what
God.
we don't know
Like, it's
in terms
crazy.
of forms of intelligence
'Cause
and what it
the
may take.
science
I can
could have
assure
been
you I
made
probably can't
by,
answer your question, but I think the
you
ultimate
know?
answer is going to surprise us all.
And then Mr. Garcia,
But that's
you had a
just the way
few
it
closing
works.
remarks.
And I know we're about to hit votes
There's
here, so
like
I'll be brief.
we have
I wanna
answers
thank you
to
all
why
for
there's no
being here. I
life
wanna
on
thank
other
Chairwoman
planets. Like,
Mace especially for
and
holding
we
this
have the
important
answer why we
bipartisan
have
hearing.
life on this
And I
planet.
want to thank all the committee members that are interested in this topic. I think our commitment to all of you and all the folks that have contacted us, and certainly to the advocates and the pilots, is that we need to continue investigating
gotta see ya.
UAPs. I think the country
owes
the country is
I
owed
say
explanations
you don't
and
want
to
an
ensure
ice
that the
age
safety
right
of national
now.
security
I mean,
is always protected.
actually, you know, it's
This is a
weird.
conversation and
I
questioning
kind
that
of
must
think we
continue.
could
So
probably be able
I'm very
to.
grateful to all of you.
More of
And
us
I
will
also
be
just
able
want
to
to
survive
just
an
add,
ice age.
just personally, I
Because
think it's
back
really
then,
important.
niggas did it without
For me,
this
two things
technology.
guide
I feel like
my
now we
questioning and
probably
my
kick
observations
ice
on
age ass,
UAPs
and
is
it probably
one
just be
is
like
we should always be
living in
guided by
Alaska. Them
facts,
niggas been in an
science,
ice age.
and data, and stay serious
Niggas
on
live
those
in the
issues.
ice age.
And the second thing
Shit.
is I think
Nah,
that we
but
should not
ice
limit
age is like the whole
our
planet.
imagination
But
and our thoughts and our
still, like,
curiosity
that's
on what
crazy.
UAPs could actually be. And I think those two things for me are really
Like,
important, and I'm
to
grateful
know
for all of
niggas
you to be here.
survived the
So with
ice
that, I yield
age.
back.
Okay, and we have Mr. Ogles, who is on the way. He's going to be here any second. Is that correct?
You're waiting for
What-
an ice age.
Chuck,
No,
and he'll
you
be the
not,
last,
nigga. You don't want no
last
goddamn
member with
ice age.
questions that we have today, and then we have votes.
Niggas
So
like
I wanna
us
thank
ain't
you all for being
surviving
here.
an ice
I want to
age.
thank Mr. Garcia and folks on
There
both
are
sides of the aisle
people
for
that
being here
will.
today and being patient. We have a
Niggas
lot more
like Luke.
questions, and I hope that this will open the door to more hearings
Luke
in the
from the
future.
outdoor boy. That
I
nigga
obviously would like
survive
to
an
know
ice
how
age.
much
He just live
taxpayers
under
are
the
spending
snow.
on this. You have the right to know. But also, if we're spending money on something that
have an
doesn't
ice
exist,
palace.
why are we spending the money? And if it doesn't, if it does exist, why are we hiding it from the public? And of course, our national security is a
Thinking
huge
about an
issue
ice age
because
is
if there's
scary as
technology
fuck. Like,
that could
imagine that
harm
shit
us
just
or
came.
allies that are in the hands of our adversaries,
Why
we
hasn't it
obviously want to
happened
stay ahead
again?
of
Like,
that to the best of our
you
ability
know,
to
it's like we're
ensure that
almost due for one.
that technology is not in the hands of someone who could use it against us or our allies
Like we
anywhere
behind
in the world.
schedule. It's about to happen.
So, Mr. Ogles, you're just in time, babe. I will recognize you for 5 minutes of questioning before we head on out today.
Well, thank you all for being here. And Madam Chairwoman, I out of breath because I sprinted to get here. But, this is an important hearing.
Out of breath. Yeah, why?
I think we all
Whoop your
know
ass in the back. Like, shut
that
the
there's something
fuck
going
up.
on. Mr. Elizondo, based on your knowledge of UAP sightings, do you believe it's fair to say that they are especially common near nuclear sites?
Yes, sir. Mr. Congressman, I absolutely am
He
convinced of
looked
that,
like
as
that. He
are
went to
my
the bathroom
colleagues
to do a couple of
inside
bumps.
the
That's
government.
why.
And the reason why I pose that question, and this has been one of my talking points from the beginning, is, Oak Ridge is in Tennessee. The so-called weather balloon that drifted, that we now know was controlled, it passed near Oak Ridge. It obviously is a sensitive site, both of interest to our adversaries and to whatever else this is. Because we know that at military installations, at sensitive locations, such as nuclear facilities, that we're seeing this take place. So the question is what is it? Do you believe they've caused an irregular activity, and why might they be interested in those sites?
Sir, in some cases, it's actually regular activity. You'd be surprised. There's actually documentation right now that's been submitted. It's not just Oak Ridge. It's Savannah River site, SRS. It's also Los Alamos. A lot of our sensitive R&D locations appear to be under some sort of surveillance and monitoring. Why? Well, because a lot of innovation comes out of those areas, a lot of new technologies, a lot of if you will, disruptive technologies that we use for our national defense
How accurate is that?
originates out of those locations and advanced concepts in physics as well. So if I was doing any type of reconnaissance, even on a foreign adversary, that's a great target to start with.
Sure, and again, this has been one of my talking points. I do have questions. What role might the Department of Energy or its subsidiaries or affiliates have in this type of technology? Or possessing this type of technology, whether it's ours or others. Mr. Gallaudet, I think your testimony has been pretty clear, but would you please reiterate that do you believe UAPs pose a threat to pilots? Excuse me.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. They were threatening Navy pilots during the exercise that I was, my people were involved with in 2015, and it's my understanding they're risking pilot safety, commercial and military today.
Well, considering, and I understand that there's a need in some cases to keep certain technologies secret, but you believe that it is posing a threat to our personnel, correct?
Yes, sir.
So I think it's reasonable to conclude that if there's a threat to our personnel who are serving our country faithfully, that there be oversight.
100%, Congressman. And in fact, that's the one thing that we've not talked about enough during this hearing is the fact that the government, the executive branch, not sharing with Congress what it knows about UAP infringes on your legislative and oversight responsibilities to such an extent that's very concerning. I mean, what else are we, if you look at national security or intelligence or foreign affairs or appropriations, you all have oversight and legislative responsibility regarding those. This UAP issue may be the greatest issue of our time, and it's being hid from you.
Well, I mean, and to your point, I think we've seen over the decades that we have certain adversaries like China, like Russia, that technologically speaking are not as advanced as us, that they lack some of the lethality that we have, and that we've seen that they've gone after our technologies and in some cases succeeded, in particular with missile technology. And so again, my concern, whether this technology emanates from us or otherworldly, that we know that we possess it. And where's the accountability? Where are the stopgaps? What are the guarantees that if this were to fall in enemy hands, that it isn't immediately weaponized against us? And I'll say this, it is clear from my experience and what I've seen that there is something out there. The question is it ours? Is it someone else's? Or is it otherworldly? And Madam Chairman, I would posit that as the legislative body, as the regulatory body, we must know. And anyone who prevents us from gaining access to that information, I would consider that criminality. Because we have U.S. personnel who may very well be in harm's way. We have technology that ultimately may threaten our very existence. With that,
accomplished in the military, in civilian government, in science, and in journalism. Some of the testimony you will hear them deliver today does not reflect well on influential individuals and agencies within the U.S. federal government and perhaps some of our contractors. It's never easy to present such information publicly. So I appreciate our witnesses voluntarily agreeing to being here today. This hearing is intended to help Congress and the American people to learn the extent of the programs and activities our government has engaged in with respect to UAPs and what knowledge it has yielded. This includes, of course, any knowledge of extraterrestrial life or technology of non-human origin. If government-funded research on UAPs has not yielded any useful knowledge, we also need to know those facts. Taxpayers deserve to know how much has it been invested, how much has been spent. They shouldn't be kept in the dark to spare the Pentagon a little bit of embarrassment. The reality is, despite their enormous taxpayer-funded budgets, the transparency of the Defense Department and the intelligence community have long been abysmal. The Pentagon has failed 6 consecutive audits. In fact, it's never actually passed one. Adding to this is a runaway overclassification of documents and materials, a reluctance to declassify materials when appropriate, and at times an outright refusal to share critical information with Congress. In short, it's not a track record that instills trust. So Congress has tried in recent years to lift the veil and find out if information about UAPs is being withheld, not only from the American public, but also from their elected representatives in Congress. Part of the transparency effort was legislation created in the Pentagon, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, but the new office is struggling to get its footing. A recent statutorily required report from AARO, intended to illuminate the government's historic assessment of UAPs, was heavily criticized by those seeking UAP transparency. The report has stoked suspicions AARO is unable, or perhaps unwilling, to bring forward the truth about the government's activities concerning UAPs. I'm disturbed that AARO itself lacks transparency. Even its budget is kept from the public. So if there is no there, then why are we spending money on it, and by how much? Why the secrecy if it's really no big deal and there's nothing there? Why hide it from the American people? Because I'm not a mathematician, but I can tell you that doesn't add up. I expect some of our witnesses to share their views on that AARO report. We will also hear from the witnesses today allegations of UAP-related misinformation and disinformation by government officials of which they are personally aware and directly experienced. And we will hear testimony today concerning recent revelations about a purportedly secret UAP program whose existence and findings may have been improperly withheld from Congress. But before we get to the witnesses, we're going to have a few more opening statements from our colleagues. And one thing I wanted to add at the end of my closing statement is there is a document that will be entered into the congressional record today. Mr. Tim Burchett from Tennessee has this document, and we just distributed it to every member up here on the dais of this document. But this is going to be the original document from the Pentagon about Immaculate Constellation that Michael Schellenberger delivered to Congress today. So thank you, Mr. Schellenberger, for this information. We are all reading it in real time now, and Mr. Burchett will enter it into the record. But 12 pages about this unacknowledged special access program that your government says does not exist. So with that, I would acknowledge my colleagues, Mr. Garcia. I want to say, first of all, to Mr. Connolly, who cannot be here today, the ranking member on my subcommittee on cybersecurity, I want to say that I was greatly saddened to hear about the recent news of Mr. Connolly's cancer diagnosis, and I want to convey to him and to all of our colleagues, we wish our very best to you and a full and speedy recovery. And with that, I would acknowledge Mr. Garcia for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairwoman. I want to thank the Chairwoman and the Chairman both for their continued support and really treating this this discussion and these hearings in a way that's bipartisan. I think one thing that's very important for all of us that are interested in the conversation around UAPs is that this is an area that both Republicans and Democrats, where we may disagree in a lot of other spaces, this is an area where bipartisanship is really important. And in fact, I would add it's critical that we all continue to work together in a way that moves forward with the truth and important disclosure. So we're here to have a bipartisan and serious conversation, I believe, about our national security. We should always ground these conversations in facts, evidence, and the data in front of us. I want to note that we have our witnesses here, and I want to thank you all for being here, and note that also amongst you have folks that have also served us in our military. And I know that for many of you, this has been a difficult process, but I'm very grateful to have you with us today, and I thank you for joining us. I also want to note that today's hearing builds on a quite, I think, also historic public hearing that we had many months ago that Mr. Grothman and others helped lead in this very same hearing room where I believe we began a really important public conversation about UAPs. And so I want to thank him for that, and I especially want to thank Chairwoman Mays for her continued advocacy on this topic. I also want to start with some facts. We know that there are objects or phenomena observed in our airspace, as our witnesses will testify, and also possibly in our oceans. In many cases, we don't know what they are, and this is, of course, why we're discussing UAPs. Now, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, has reported hundreds of UAPs that remain, quote, uncharacterized and unattributed, and which, quote, appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. This is our own AARO office. Now, we shouldn't prejudge what they're detecting things, and we know that we don't understand them, and this is worth investigating. Now, the American people have legitimate questions, and I believe it's critical that Congress should help address them. This is about the truth and science and facts. Now, transparency and faith in our institutions is vital in a good democracy.
On
Now, I'm proud to say this
kick.com.
hearing will build on that important bipartisan work, and I want to thank everyone for being involved, including members of our committee. Now, in our last hearing in July, we heard testimony of a significant number of pilots of major airlines have witnessed UAPs as well, but have no real confidential way of reporting them to the government. We heard that commercial pilots who encounter UAPs may be hesitant to speak openly due to stigma or fear of retaliation. We also know that AARO has reported that, and I want to quote, that most reports still reflect a bias towards restricted military airspace, a result of reporting from military personnel
it was just me on
and
my
sensors
side,
present in such areas. And so the lack of ability for civilian pilots raises real safety concerns and limits our ability to understand UAPs. This is a particular piece of this conversation that I am very interested in. Now, our last hearing inspired us to introduce the Safe Airspace for Americans Act, joined by Chairman Grothman, Chairwoman Mace, and a bipartisan group of co-sponsors. I see some of our leaders from Safe Airspace for Americans Act here, and that would create a safe reporting for UAP process, which we want to continue to do.
My bad. I hear
now, members of both parties and
popping.
senior officials in multiple administrations have now taken an interest in this issue.
Maybe I sound like that to you, too.
Mainstream media, in many cases, are beginning to take more of an interest in this issue,
Let me
and
drop
we should all be
out,
proud to
drop
carry
back
that
in.
work and build confidence for the American people. I believe we can always be more transparent. To me, this hearing and others are simply about the truth and getting to the facts of what these UAPs actually are. It's very important that we show that Democrats and Republicans in Congress can work together to cut through misinformation and look for a serious and thoughtful way to have the discussion in public. Many of us have also called for additional public hearings to discuss UAPs.
Oh, my bad.
This should be a topic that continues on throughout the Congress.
This is muted and I'm
Gather
watching
more
you live.
information,
Listen
data,
to
and
you
work
live.
with the relevant agencies to gather more information. Finally, I
Yeah,
just
my
want to
bad.
add that
I
those
forgot
that
I
are
was on
here
this.
on this dais, many of us have participated also in
I'm listening
classified
to you talk.
briefings as well,
sound
and where we have also
crazy,
gained
though.
a lot
I
of
don't know if
important, I
it's
think, and
me
interesting
or the
information, at least
stream.
I personally have. And so with that information, we want to continue
It could
to
be my
sharing.
fan.
And thank all our witnesses for
yeah.
being here.
Did
And
you
with
move
that,
it away?
There you go. I just turned off the fan.
Thank you,
Oh,
Mr.
that's
Garcia.
why.
hear
And
me?
I'd now like to
Yeah,
recognize
the
Mr.
noise
Grothman for
cancellation
a
trying to
5-minute
work.
introduction.
Trying to, yeah.
Good morning. I'd like to
Yeah, you
thank our
can't do that
witnesses for
about
being
wins
here one
like
more
that.
time.
Like,
This
that's
is
crazy.
a topic I've been interested in.
Yeah, because I have it on high
I'd like to
instead
thank
of
Ms.
low.
Mace for working with me on
Yeah.
this
That shit
topic
blowing
and for
my
making
face.
this a joint subcommittee hearing.
Okay, I was saying
Last year,
that
the
you're
Subcommittee
buffing,
on
and if
National
do you
Security
have your
Border and Foreign
VPN
Affairs shared
No,
a crucial
on
story
US or UK?
to understand the potential
I mean, yeah,
national
you shouldn't be
security
wearing
risk
your
of unidentified
work clothes
anomalous
shirt. That way you don't.
phenomena, or UAPs.
People be getting in
We
trouble for
heard from
dumb
former
shit.
Navy Commander David Fravor, who shared
Even
firsthand
just for
experience
freedom
with
of
UAP
freedom of
engaged
speech shit,
while on duty
Yeah,
which
in
yeah.
they still gonna get
We
sued for.
learned
You
from
know what I
David
mean?
Koresh, a
Yeah,
former
But
member of the
nonetheless,
intelligence
you
community,
know,
revealed
Let me
you
do
fucking
that.
supposed
Shit.
fucking no
existence
te
of
vengas a
secret
joder la
government
vida.
programs
What?
hidden from congressional oversight.
Word
Additionally,
up.
We got a city
former
worker
military pilot
hablando
Brian Graves
mierda,
informed
como
He
us
a
si no
Trump
of
trabaja.
ways in which
supporter.
military and
He
commercial
support
pilots
Trump.
can report UAP sightings. Since that
We
last
should get him
hearings, I've had
fired.
several briefings
He
with government
racist.
agencies to deepen
He
my
support
understanding with
Trump.
these issues.
He a
First, the
racist.
Department of Defense Inspector General's office informed us
Yeah.
that the Department of Defense does not have a streamlined process for service members to report UAP activity. Since then, the Joint Chiefs have implemented standards for UAP reporting.
They don't want to
across the
tell. No,
services.
it's.
The
I mean, I
Intelligence
get it. They
Community
don't want to
Inspector
cause
General
mass
informed us that
hysteria,
whistleblowers
but
will
Lord
often
Jesus
fear
Christ, you can't.
retaliation for
This
reporting
shit
mass
can't be going
hysteria.
on, and
highly
you don't.
sensitive
You're going to
government
cause
projects
more
or
mass hysteria
information.
because now
Yeah.
we don't know what it is. If you tell us,
AARO
listen,
has expressed
yeah,
to the
it's some
committee that, like
aliens. We
any other
work with them.
federal
We cool, you
government
know. We got a
agency,
peace
it
treaty.
faced
All right, cool.
challenges in
Yeah,
its
that would be.
establishment, specifically in hiring staff to manage
I don't know.
UAP historical records and
No,
coordinating
your
with
stream
other
is
federal
buffing.
agencies. Well, these agencies have been helpful to us in understanding the challenges that come from
That's
collecting
all the
UAP
people want to
data.
know.
None of them have been able to substantiate
Turn on the
the
captions
claims
on your
made at this hearing
videos,
last year
Gary.
by David Grush. Despite our committee members endlessly questioning these agencies
This way I don't have to hear you
inside
talk.
and outside of a skiff, I hope our witnesses today will be able to provide evidence and content that is worthwhile to our
I was trying to
pursuits
find this
of
live
eliminating
stream.
government
Like,
waste,
where's this coming from?
increasing transparency. To help alleviate some of the roadblocks, I'm supportive of measures that were included in last year's National Defense Authorization Act to increase transparency and improve record-keeping measures when it comes to UAPs. But I believe there's still more work to go. I co-led the Safe Airspace for Americans Act with Ranking Member Garcia, which requires the Federal Aviation Administration to develop procedures to collect UAP data from civilian aviators. I look forward to working with members of Congress to see that this legislation and other UAP legislation crosses the finish line. I'm deeply alarmed by the reporting of the massive drone swarm that flew over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia last December. Langley is the home of the first fighter wing, which maintains